So let's wrap up this week addressing some sociologically informed solutions to police brutality and the prison industrial complex in the United States. Well, like we've unpacked through these presentations, through the content for this week, issues pertaining to police brutality and the prison industrial complex, mass incarceration, are heavily influenced by race and socioeconomic status. So one of the first building blocks that, of course, we need to do is to become more informed and educated ourselves about the continued existence of racism in the United States. As scholars like Angela Davis and others argue, modern day prisons are essentially just an extension of slavery, exploiting the bodies of Black and brown individuals to do this cheap labor. And as we talked about specifically with the privatizations of prisons, prisons have a lot to benefit from by keeping people incarcerated. And so if they're really not serving a functional purpose in society of reducing crime or of helping prisoners to reintegrate into society upon their release, we should become very critical of the existence of prisons in their current condition in the United States and work to educate our youth, especially about the issues of racism and how that's connected to the school to prison pipeline, and these other social problems that we've been unpacking thus far. So there's a quote here referencing teachingtolerance.org, which again is a resource I've pointed you towards in the past. It's a really wonderful website that has a lot of really helpful information to educate yourselves and others about issues pertaining to a number of social justice inequalities, and the prison industrial complex is included in that as well. But what are some specific behaviors that we can do? What are some policies that we could advocate for, or some actions that we could take in our own lives to help address police brutality and prison industrial complex? Well, first and foremost, we can encourage our policymakers to require higher standards of cultural competence training for our law enforcement. For instance, you could very easily call your local city council and ask them, hey, what are the current policies in place for our law enforcement within Corpus Christi, within Nueces County? What trainings do law enforcement officers have to undergo? Do they have to undergo a racial bias training? Do they have to undergo certain trainings to expose them to the realities of racism and prejudice and discrimination that exist in our society today? How are we conditioning our law enforcement officers to address the racial biases, to ensure that they're not killing Black and brown people when they don't need to be using excessive force in that regard? We are entitled to question our local governments and to encourage our local governments to ask more of our law enforcement so we can all feel more safe and protected in our societies. We should also be advancing legislation to ensure that law enforcement are wearing body cams at all times and to hold them accountable when they are not. The unfortunate reality is that even as body cams have become more common, police officers are being required in many places to wear body cams at all times. So how they're treating the people that they're accusing of committing crimes can be recorded, and that evidence, if necessary, can be used in a court of law to ensure that people are getting justice if they're being treated unfairly. The unfortunate reality is that even when police officers are wearing body cams, that evidence is not being used to get justice for many people, specifically for Black and brown people who are still being experiencing excessive force by police officers. So it can help situations. It's definitely better than nothing, but it isn't still a perfect solution. Another thing we can do is support changes to the law that would reduce punishments and sentencing for nonviolent crimes. Especially, like I mentioned before, possession of marijuana is becoming one of the most popularly discussed areas in this regard, and it's something we'll talk about in a couple of weeks in more detail when we address social problems pertaining to drugs in the U.S. But people that are being committed are sentenced to 10, 15, 20 years in jail just for possession of marijuana. They're taking up space in prisons. They're obviously increasing the expenses that we're paying. Like I mentioned, we pay almost $200 billion a year in taxes just to maintain our public prisons in the United States. And so it's a very expensive and non-productive institution in our society, because higher rates of incarceration, like we talked about, aren't lowering crime rates. They're not making less crime happen. And they're not doing any good to help the people that are being incarcerated. So these beg some really serious questions. I've been throwing around this term of abolishing prisons and abolishing the police a lot, but what does that really mean? Well, like I mentioned a little bit previously, this idea to abolish prisons has been around for quite some time. And the whole idea is that instead of spending and funneling all of this money to maintaining these mass incarceration prisons in the United States, why don't we reallocate those funds to establish more programming, better educational opportunities, more employment opportunities for people, specifically from marginalized communities, people of lower socioeconomic status, people of color, etc. So we don't need so many people feeling like they have to resort to lives of crime in order to provide for themselves and for their families. Well, that same line of logic now is being applied to the police. There's a growing body of evidence that police are becoming increasingly violent. Look at these protests that have been taking place with the Black Lives Matter movement. All of these protests started off peacefully, but even when there was just peaceful protests, police are showing up looking like they're in the military, with riot gear on, shields, pepper spray, firing rubber bullets into peaceful audiences. And just causing this excessive amount of violence. And then there's the discussion of, well, what about the looting that took place with that? And I posted a separate piece in here this week to kind of unpack that. And I'd be curious to see what you post in your discussion comments this week and your EOPs about the looting. But essentially, the idea behind looting is that imagine not having your voice heard for centuries and being marginalized and oppressed to the point where you can't even afford the necessities you need to live because you've experienced racial oppression your entire life. So you get to the point where you feel like you need to steal something just so you can reclaim some of this power that's been stripped away from you. And that's one perspective of that. But this idea behind abolishing the police is gaining a lot more traction now. And one of the most commonly asked questions people is, well, if we get rid of police, how do we possibly stay safe? And I pulled two quotes from a reading I assigned this week because I think they're just very powerful and help us think with a sociological imagination about this topic. So how would we stay safe if we got rid of the police? The first quote says, "Police abolition work is not about snapping our fingers and instantly defunding every department in the world. Rather, we're talking about the gradual process of strategically reallocating resources, funding, and responsibility away from police and toward community-based models of safety, support, and prevention. The people who respond to crises in our community should be the people who are best equipped to deal with those crises, rather than strangers armed with guns who very likely do not live in the neighborhoods they're patrolling. We want to create space for more mental health service providers, social workers, victim survivor advocates, religious leaders, neighbors, and friends, all of the people who really make up the fabric of the community, to look out for one another." It continues to state that crime is not random. Most of the time, it happens when someone has been unable to meet their basic needs through other means. So to really fight crime, we don't need more cops. We need more jobs, more educational opportunities, more arts programs, more community centers, more mental health resources, and more of a say in how our own communities function. I mean, I just think there's so much power in these words here, and it's really challenged me to think more deeply about this topic, which I admittedly have not thought much about in the past. But I'm seeing a lot of really positive ideas here from a sociological perspective, right? This idea of getting away from funding the police and providing more money into this really what has become a very increasingly violent organization, and instead allocating those resources to help communities build up their people and to provide opportunities to help them function. This part down here is especially important. Crime isn't random, right? It's not this idea that the more police we have, the less crime we'll have. That hasn't worked. That hasn't been working for the past several decades. We know that. Instead, why not try and prevent crime from happening by increasing the resources available to people, increasing education opportunities, increasing employment opportunities, increasing and making easier access to mental health resources, right? So people have the resources they need to be successful, so they don't need to resort to committing crimes in the first place. I'd be really curious to hear your perspectives about this in the discussion comments this week, because I think this is a topic that is going to become increasingly common and popular in the coming years. So I hope many of you will consider the idea of abolishing the prison system and abolishing the police from a sociological perspective, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say this week.